Hello, film fans. Welcome to the Film vs. Film podcast. My name is Martin Harries, your host. I'm a filmmaker on occasion, but mainly can't stop yapping about movies. On this podcast, every episode, I pick a topic from a film that's coming out at the cinema or on streaming. I pick a favourite film from that topic and battle it out against a guest to decide which film would become the greatest film of all time. If you enjoy this podcast, please leave us a 5-star review and subscribe. Please enjoy part 2. Hello guys, welcome back to part 2 of the podcast where we are talking legends, Sean Connery, Bond films, of course. And of course, as you probably already know by now, people, this is the part of the show where we have a look at your Instagram responses from the previous episode. And that previous episode was on Slasher Films 2, the sequel. And Anton Kinlove, a regular responder, went with Scream, the 1996 movie, not the fifth one. N. Patek went for Psycho 2, which is cool. Great choice there. We covered Psycho 2 last year. Movies, Games, and Popcorn went with The Burning. So yeah, a few responses there.
We covered The Burning on my podcast.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, on reviewing history, because it has a very loose basis on real history. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Would that be your go-to slasher film? What's your favorite slasher for you?
My favorite slasher film is the first Scream from 1996, but my favorite slasher franchise is Friday the 13th.
Nice. Yeah, that was my choice for the podcast. I chose the final chapter. Unfortunately,
That's part 4,
out.
Correct?
Yeah.
What did it lose to?
Child's Play.
No, you should have won that.
Well, Parker from Dissect That Film, it's like one of his top films of all time. So
oh, really?
He wasn't going to go
Play?
down. Yeah, he wasn't going to go down lightly with that. So, but of course, we are talking Sean Connery Bond films for our Legends episode, and it is your turn now, Brian. So what did you go for?
I picked Goldfinger, just because I do love this film, and I kind of felt, I wasn't sure what you would pick, and I felt like if we're doing a Connery Bond episode, I felt like wouldn't be right to not mention Goldfinger.
Yeah.
So I almost picked You Only Live Twice just because I find that movie so much fun. Yeah. And I was like, you know what? I'll just pick Goldfinger just to make sure it's spoken about because I think it needs to be.
Yeah, it's probably arguably the most iconic Bond film there is. So many like famous iconography, imagery from that film, characters all from that film. So yeah, it's so good. So what happens in Goldfinger, Brian?
In Goldfinger, James Bond is tasked with finding out what Yorick Goldfinger is up to, and he ends up discovering that he has a plan to detonate a nuclear bomb inside of Fort Knox, which will designate it will ruin the U.S. economy, and it will make the U.S.'s gold useless for 50-something years, and in turn make his gold worth more money. And what's funny is if Goldfinger would have just waited till like 1971, Nixon did that anyway because he took the dollar off the gold standard. So if Goldfinger was just patient, he would have been fine.
Yeah, I did not know that.
I think 73, just to be clear. Yeah, something like that.
Amazing. Yeah, I think like because the intelligence services are kind of just keeping an eye on Goldfinger kind of at the start, where he's kind of transferring a lot of his gold from country to country and depositing it in Europe, and apparently when you do that, certain countries have a stronger value for their gold, so that's why he's kind of doing that, but they don't know how he's transferring all the gold so quickly and efficiently. And obviously you find out that he's doing it with his Rolls Royce. He kind of melts down the bodywork onto the car and then remelts it down, and yeah.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. So MI6 are just like, how is he making his gold like so valuable by transferring it so easily in Europe? And yeah, and then Bond discovers his plan. So initial reactions for me, I think this is the one film where you really get into, like, I guess, the gadgetry action of a Bond movie. This is the first one where the gadgets are like really expansive, really show off what they can do, and they really kind of go not crazy, but like you're like, wow, like no other franchise is doing this, and you don't see this kind of thing in the real world. Obviously now with a lot of the early gadgets we kind of just use in our daily life.
Yeah.
Whereas back then you're like, whoa, that is awesome. Obviously don't have ejector seats in our cars, but that would still be very cool to have.
I wish.
Yeah.
That's my dream car. Like when people talk about like if you could have one movie car, what would you have?
Oh yeah.
For me, it's either the time traveling DeLorean,
yeah,
or this Aston Martin. The Aston non like magical powers where I can't time travel and make myself rich. It's the Aston Martin DB5. I think this is the coolest car ever put in any movie, bar none.
Oh yeah. I mean, and it's very, classical looking, and it kind of has that kind of very stylish 60s quality, because you wouldn't necessarily associate it with like a sports car that you would want to drive necessarily, but it's because it's so iconic and associated with James Bond, you're like, yeah, I would love that.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why that particular car, the Aston Martin DB5, comes back all the time in future Bond films, because it's now just considered as James Bond's car. There's no argument. Initial reactions for Goldfinger the first time I saw it, yeah, all the gadgetry action was great, but just kind of like Odd Job was quite a big thing, I think, when I first watched it. Like his presence in the film and just such an inventive way of killing someone, and he even has a huge impact when I was growing up with the iconic Goldfinger game, GoldenEye game, where you could play Odd Job and you could use his hat to kill people in that video game on Nintendo 64. That was awesome. And it's definitely got one of the most iconic villains that's not Blofeld as well. I think besides from Blofeld, the one that you would go for is Goldfinger. And I remember like Christopher Nolan saying that it's such, like, Goldfinger is his favorite, I think, just because of how grand in scale that Goldfinger's plan is. It's such a clever kind of plan to just cripple the Western economy like that. I'm like, no other that I can't think of anyway right now, any other film that kind of has ever tried to do that necessarily in such a grand scale in very like Bond spy action way in a movie. So I always kind of happily always go back to this film and rewatch it. If it comes up on TV, it's one of those Bond films where you're like, yeah, I have to watch it to the end.
It's a joy to watch. From start to finish, it's just a fun movie. I think what I really love about Goldfinger as a villain is his motivations. Like a lot of these villains they have almost a grander thing that they want. Like they want to start a new society, or, we're doing this for Spectre because we want to end up taking over the world. Yeah. And he has the most base motivation, basically, where it's just greed. I just want to make myself richer. And one of the things I love about it, and this is a trope in the Fleming books, and he does this with Hugo Drax. And Hugo Drax is the villain in Moonraker, but he's so different in the book. He's much more like Goldfinger in this, where Fleming has a preoccupation with villains who are rich and they don't need to cheat, but they still cheat, even though they don't need it.
Because they can.
Yeah, he views it almost like it's like the lowest thing you could do, where it's like you're already rich and you're still so petty that you need to cheat. and it's like Drax does that, Goldfinger does that, and obviously we see that in the movie. But Goldfinger is just all about greed.
What do people with lots of money want? More money.
Yeah.
um, so directing then, like the opening scene feels like it's pure Connery Bond for me, like a great like mashup of style, action, and comedy. Like the best parts of the action are when like Bond fires this rope gun like to climb up this wall, like the guard slowly walks over to investigate and Bond falls into shot quickly to take him out, which felt like it wouldn't be out of place in like a modern action film. It was so kind of well done and slick there. Like the fight in the hotel room has its moments of brutality, but kind of the electric shot kill was awesome. The whole look of what's going on, bringing the style, like with Bond, like dressed in all black to begin with, and then he reveals like the white suit and red rose is iconic. And then kind of with him putting the plastic explosive on the drums of nitro that seem a bit randomly placed as they seem to be in a nice exotic apartment. But hey, it's there. Like the best part of the sequence by far is when like the explosion goes off when Bond casually is lighting up a cigarette while everyone rushes out. That image epitomizes Sean Connery's James Bond for me. Then when you have like great comedy with like the duck hat wetsuit, yes. He just chucks it into the water after he's done with it. And obviously the one-liners, you know, shocking, positively shocking.
Yeah, there's two Connery moments that always stick out for me as like when I think of Sean Connery as Bond, the two images that really sum up his tenure as Bond. Number one is the first introduction of him at the casino table in Dr. No, where it is, in my opinion, probably the coolest anybody has ever looked in a single movie. As he's sitting at the table and he has the one cigarette kind of hanging out of his mouth, and he's just Bond. James Bond. And it's the cool, and he's lighting the cigarette. Oh my God, it's so cool. I teach a film class and I show Dr. No every year to my class. So it was nice to watch Dr. No, From Russia with Love, and Goldfinger kind of all within like a week or two, very close together. So I may keep going now and just go through the whole series again. I love it so much. And I'm already, 1, 2, 3. But that moment, his first moment, and him standing there in the white tux, lighting the cigarette, as the explosion's going, everyone is panicking and he doesn't care and he's just smoking is so cool.
Done my job.
And I love that tux so much that when I got married, I told my wife, I was like, that's the tux I'm wearing.
Amazing.
And I wore the white tux. Yeah. I was like, so cool. Look, I'm not really going to get a chance to wear a tux often, but I'm going full Bond,
Yeah. It's great when they kind of reference it in future movies as well. I think Daniel Craig wore it in Spectre. Yeah. Which is cool. I loved the car chase in Switzerland and how they show off all the kind of gadgets on the iconic Aston Martin DB5. I love how, to begin with, on the Swiss Alps, that the first gadget you see is a gadget that Q didn't explain to Bond earlier, where these kind of spinning claw things come out of the wheels and tear up Tilly Masterson's car, which was a great surprise. Her car crashing, not so much. I think slightly a bit jarring with the editing there, but a tad clunky for me. But you can give that a little bit of a pass when you're watching it, just because of the act of how the car crashed,
Yeah.
So, when we get to like the main chase in the woods, it's not particularly like intense watching it now. And you can clearly see when the shots are on like Connery driving, it's in a studio, but there's a particular charm in watching each gadget being displayed one by one, all practically done, even when you feel like the way we have like a slight change of pace when they get out of the car and like Oddjob kills Tilly with his hat, and you kind of soon realize the scene was constructed so a goon could get into the passenger seat so Bond could eject him. The wide shot of the guy like flying out of the car, I guess, is a little wide for my tastes, I guess, but to just like capture something so wild as that in the early 60s is still amazing.
That's the thing. You kind of have to grade it on a curve a bit,
Yeah.
because it is the 1960s. There's no CGI.
No,
All
yeah.
this is practical. It's crazy. Like, when you think about what they were doing.
Then I like how kind of the chase between the warehouses feels like a step up in intensity, where you can feel kind of the fixed cameras capture the kind of shaky high speed nature of the chase. Then just kind of a great piece of humor to end the scene where Oddjob smiles at himself in the mirror before opening the door as Bond kind of just flops out of it. Yeah, being knocked out because of the crash. Yeah, not very good at chicken, is he, Sean? But yeah, great car sequence, just showing off all the gadgets practically.
Yeah, he shoots the guns, the ejector seat, the smoke. It's great as he's just, destroying the other enemies as much as he can. It's a lot of fun. That's what I would if I had to describe Goldfinger in one word, it would just be fun.
Yeah. The kind of the last few scenes at Fort Knox is pretty good, but I have to say it's a little funny when like Pussy Galore's like flying circus fly over all kind of the military bases and release the nerve gas and everyone just falls down. And like in some shots they kind of fall over before the plane flies over, but hey, it is what it is.
Well, it's funny, it doesn't look that great and it also kind of doesn't make sense, but then when you think about it and you realize that the military was staging that, then it does kind of make sense. It's like, oh yeah.
It's still funny though.
Oh yeah, it's funny. I mean.
But after they break into the vault, there's kind of two situations here where you have like Bond trapped in the vault and handcuffed to an atomic bomb, and Oddjob's in there with him, and you have like the gun battle outside the vault with the American army trying to get in the vault. And the balance between the scenes is definitely with the fight between Bond and Oddjob, which I definitely prefer, obviously, as the gunfight is pretty one-dimensional, I would say, where, as with the fight, like, you don't really know how Bond is going to beat Oddjob, as he completely overwhelms Bond with his strength. Like, Oddjob's loving life, loving it, with all these, like, little smiles he gives him. So it's quite a cool moment when Bond ends up like kind of electrocuting him with the cables while Oddjob tries to take his hat from the metal bars, electrocuting himself. Yeah, just great stuff. Because in that moment, you're just like, I don't know how he's going to beat him here. He's definitely not going to beat him with his own strength, that's for sure. So he has to be clever with it.
It's super cool in that one-on-one fight with Oddjob, because they spend the whole movie building up how strong Oddjob is and how much of a threat he is. And when you get to that scene, it doesn't seem like Bond can take him. And it's like, how is Bond going to figure this out? And he gets the hat, and you're like, that's how he's going to do it. And he misses. Yeah. And it's like, oh, he's fucked. Oddjob is going to get that hat. He's in trouble. And then when Oddjob goes and he grabs that hat and Bond runs with the broken cords, I guess, and he plugs it in and electrocutes him, it's awesome.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I didn't particularly miss the fact that the gun battle wasn't like bigger or grander, because the fight between Bond and Oddjob was really good. So I didn't mind that too much. That, the gun battle wasn't as exciting as it could have been, but so that's not exactly a huge gripe at all. I guess this is more of a screenplay thing, but I'll just say it now. But is there an element that, is it a tad dissatisfying that, Sean Connery isn't the one to like work out how to turn the bomb off, that Felix is the one, or his colleague? Or is that just too harsh?
I mean, we're still at the point where we're not at like Roger Moore levels where he knows every single thing ever, where it's like they'll ask Roger Moore, are you familiar with this exotic flower? And he'll cite like an encyclopedia entry on it. And he's like a know-it-all. They haven't done that to Sean Connery. So it's like, I guess he doesn't know how to disarm the bomb. And he already kind of saved the day by doing his job enough. And I do love that even as a little kid, the first time I saw it, I was familiar enough with tropes in fiction that I'm like, they're going to stop the bomb at 001 because that's what happens in every movie.
Yeah.
And I love that in this, they stop it at 007. And it's a nice little, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Like that always tickles me.
I guess it makes up for it a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you got a favorite shot or scene for you from a directional point of view?
Ooh, man. There's so many. This is tough. I'm gonna say just that cold open. I think everything within the cold open is so cool. Where he's in the suit and then he goes back to the hotel and he's making out with the girl and he sees in her eye the guy coming from behind and he flips him into the water and they're like having that scramble where the guy's going to get the gun now and it looks like has Bond and he just tips the heat lamp in. Yeah. Oh, I love it.
That's cool. You mentioned your Funko Pops of James from the James Bond franchise. I've got a few. I think I've got Blofeld, I've got Jaws, and I've got Jill Masterson's gold dead body as a Funko
That's
Pop.
Cool.
Which I don't like very much because it keeps falling over because the feet are fucking small. So I have to kind of prop it up against my Blu-rays. But yeah, it's that scene which is my kind of favorite scene from this film from a directional point of view, where like Bond has just like slept with her and he goes over to the fridge to get more ice for the champagne. Then all of a sudden this arm comes into shot and like knocks him out, and you have this amazing silhouette shot of Oddjob moving out of the room. Then when Bond wakes up, Jill Masterson is covered in gold paint with her bum covered in a shot of a cushion. It's such a striking image that can only be associated with James Bond for me. It's quite haunting in a way that someone would go to so much effort to kill someone that way as well, just to kind of send a message. You know, that Goldfinger is not to be messed with as well with this, that he goes to such lengths to kill someone like that. And yeah, it's just quite I mean, if you didn't know, I mean, it's hard like watching these films if you haven't watched them for the first time, because there's so much popular culture around James Bond, and that image is hard to not see before you watch this movie. But if you imagine a world of not seeing that, knowing that, like seeing that for the first time without knowing anything, you must be like, wow, that's quite an incredible image to witness for me.
Yeah, I would say that is easily a top 10 most iconic James Bond image. You know, like I feel even people who don't necessarily know the franchise have an understanding that moment is from James Bond. And in fact, it's so iconic that they tried to duplicate it in Daniel Craig's run, except they did it with oil with Gemma Arterton.
Yeah, in Quantum of Solace.
Yes.
Yeah. So, directing score for me, for Goldfinger, I think I go pretty high, to be honest, because of just because of how iconic this film is, just generally. I think for a lot of Bond fans, this is their favorite. It's very close. It's definitely in my top 5, if not my top 3, I would say, of Bond films. I mean, you've got the most iconic car, some of the most iconic images, probably the most famous henchman. Yeah, the kind of arguably the grandest villain plan, if you will, in terms of scale. So, yeah, it's right up there, and it's direct, and you know, just in terms of filmmaking, it's really well done, and really kind of holds up for the most part in this movie. So I will go like, I'll go like a 9.3.
Okay.
Just because of the iconography of it and just how famous it is.
There's so many striking, iconic images in this movie, and it's so well done. I mean, like, the look of this film is just fantastic. It has this, like, comparing it to From Russia with Love. From Russia with Love has this, like, darkness about it, which really fits the story there, because you're telling, like, an espionage thriller. But this has this, like, brightness to it. You know, they're in Miami, they're in America, they're in Tennessee. and even Switzerland, everything feels so vibrant and lush. It's just a gorgeous looking movie. And Guy Hamilton, becomes a favorite of Eon for the Bond movies. He does 4 of them. So I'm going to say this is, oh man, this is tough. In my heart, it's a 10. But for your show, I'm going to say this is a 9.2. I'll give it a 9.2.
So what flaws would you say it has then?
I don't think it has any. I think this is like perfect. I'm trying not to just give everything 10s, which is what I want to do. So I easily could give everything a 10. I think it's paced very well. I don't think it's ever boring. I think all the action scenes are great. I love even like the golf sequence. I love the interactions between Bond and Goldfinger. Like I have so much fun with those. Like I love that a lot of this starts out just because Bond was in a hotel with him and Bond was like, this guy's a cheating asshole. I'm going to go screw him up. So I love that. There's nothing I can really ding this on. I have a blast with this.
Awesome. So screenplay then. I quite liked how the film portrays the threat of Goldfinger throughout the first hour of the film. Like, you obviously have Jill Masterson's death being painted in gold, but I especially like the little game of golf Bond and Goldfinger have, as you said, Brian. It's pretty high stakes in terms of how much money they're playing for, but the tone of it doesn't feel like that at all. It feels very casual, like Bond and Goldfinger are trying to outwit each other. They both cheat against each other. And seeing who has the kind of the best knowledge on gold bullion. I like how Goldfinger is not messing about where he's not daft at all. Like, he knows that Bond is here to find out about his business affairs, that this casual tone goes when Oddjob hurls his hat at this statue's head, which obviously cuts it off cleanly, and you're like, whoa, that was awesome. Plus you're like, Bond's got his hands full here. So I just love these types of scenes in Bond films where Bond and the main villain are kind of testing out each other's weaknesses and trying to outwit each other in a very polite way. They're always just trying to be really nice to each other, which I love.
I'm a sucker for those scenes. If you put Bond and his villain at a casino table or a dinner table and you have them talking and interacting with each other, and there's this level where it's I know what you're up to and you know what I'm up to, but we're going to be cordial here.
Yeah.
And I love that. I eat it up every time. And this one is so great because they're competing against each other directly and they're both cheating each other. It's like Connery or Bond already knows that Goldfinger is a cheat. He's witnessed him cheat at the hotel. So he's like, okay, I'm going to jump the gun here. I'm going to block his ball.
Yeah.
Just to see how this all plays out.
You play a Schlesinger 1, don't you? This is a Schlesinger 7. Ugh, that was terrible.
You must have lost it somewhere back there on the 18th hole.
Yeah. The laser torture scene is great, short and efficient, but still great. And the only James Bond torture scene where he doesn't use a gadget to get out of, or someone else kind of saves him. He has to talk his way out of it, which is awesome to see in a very kind of gadget-heavy film with GB5, etc. It's interesting as well with the power dynamics between Bond and Goldfinger, throughout the film, because when Bond first meets Goldfinger in Miami, Bond is in complete control over Goldfinger in the gin game, telling him to lose through the earpiece with binoculars. Then during the golf game, they're on sort of an even playing field, trying to suss each other out whilst cheating against each other. Then when Bond gets captured and you have this laser torture scene, Goldfinger is now in complete control and Bond is completely helpless. really. So for me, it's quite unusual in a Bond film to sort of have this power arc where the villain actually gains more control over Bond. Usually it's the other way around, like where Bond finds the villain's weaknesses and acts on it. Here, his hands are basically tied, metaphorically, so it's just really, really interesting in how those power dynamics work out. Whereas at the start, like, Goldfinger's not in a great position, whereas by the end, Goldfinger is not particularly worried about Bond at all. He has him in his pocket, so to speak, and Bond is very, even though he's not really showing it, of course, he's always got to show this confident persona, but like, Bond is always kind of running out of options in each scene, it feels like, and Goldfinger just gains confidence until the last act,
Bond is never ahead of what's happening in this, almost.
No. Yeah.
He's always kind of behind the 8-ball, a little behind, trying to play catch up on the scheme. And I think that's kind of what makes it a little fun. And that moment, obviously, with the laser is super iconic as well, and has been parodied in everything. The Simpsons did it, and a million other things. But I like that Bond is like, he's like, oh, I may die here, and he's just throwing out anything he has left. Yeah. He's like, Operation Grand Slam,
What? How do you know about that?
Can you afford to take that chance?
Plus, what I love about this film as well is that the film gives the villain a reason to keep Bond alive. Where Bond mentions Operation Grand Slam, Goldfinger's like, how the hell do you know that? And who has he potentially told about it? Goldfinger doesn't particularly press him on that, I don't think. But when Bond tries to send a message to Felix Leiter using the little homing device, and when that gets destroyed, like, Felix is like, we need to get a visual on Bond to make sure he's all right from his last location. And one of Goldfinger's men like sees Felix and his partner, so Goldfinger's like, okay, let's make it look like Bond is in a comfortable position in the compound. He's been treated okay, there's no issue here. So Felix like sees Bond and Pussy Galore having a nice walk. So if Felix saw him dead or couldn't see him at all, Felix would bring the full force of the law on top of Goldfinger. In any other movie, not just in like other Bond films, you're like, why is the villain keeping Bond alive? Why are they keeping the hero alive? Like, why are you delaying? Whereas here, he actually has a reason to keep him alive, which I love. It's so rare to see that.
It's that Austin Powers thing, It's the Austin Powers thing where Scott Evil goes to Dr. Evil's like, I got the gun, let's go, we can kill him together, we can do it. And this is like, oh, it makes sense, because if we kill him, they'll know we're up to something. We killed an agent, and now we got the full force on us. So we need to make it look like Bond is still investigating and he's undercover and coy. So let's have him walk with Pussy Galore. Felix Leiter will say, oh, there's Bond with another pretty girl, and he won't think anything of it.
Yeah. So it does kind of surprise me a little bit in other Bonds, as I said, and other movies like this, that they don't try and work it into the story enough where the villain has a reason to keep the hero alive when they're in the villain's lair, so to speak, So I just love that about this film, is that there is a legitimate reason to keep him alive.
I just had a thought. Isn't Skyfall kind of almost the inverse of that? Where it's like, when you think about it, they capture the villain, and instead of just killing the villain, they bring him in, and it allows the villain to enact his plan. It's the reverse of this. I never thought of it till right now.
Poor Skyfall. Sorry. We cracked it. So, interesting, iconic, funny lines. There is a bunch.
Oh, man.
How long have you got?
My name is Pussy Galore. I must be dreaming.
So naughty, that one. So naughty.
Yeah. That one's good. Obviously, do you expect me to talk, Goldfinger? No, Mr. Bond. I expect you to die.
Yeah. At least he won't be using heroin-flavored bananas to finance revolutions.
Yes.
One of my favorites that kind of makes me laugh every time. Ejector seat? You're joking. I never joke about my work, 007.
Yes, that's a great one, too.
And one great one from Bond's caddy while they're playing golf. And and when Oddjob like drops a ball like just on the edge of the rough, and he's like, if that's his original ball, I'm Arnold Palmer.
Yeah.
Which is great. Bonds to Oddjob. Manners Oddjob. I thought you always took your hat off to a lady. Referencing when she kills Tilly Matterson.
Tilly.
Yeah. One of my favorite ones from Goldfinger as well, when he's kind of talking to all these American criminals in his hideout. Another thing we kind of didn't really mention about the directing is just the sets. The sets are pretty amazing in this film, especially kind of like Goldfinger's lair when he is doing kind of laying out his plan to all these criminals. Like, you have all these revolving screens and the pool table transforms, and it just feels so grand. Like, incredible work from Ken Adam. Yeah. So good.
I mean, he's kind of the unsung hero of the Bond franchise, because even the Dr. No base, and I believe the opening chess sequence in From Russia with Love, that room is fantastic. Goldfinger's base is great as well, and so many others. Basically every Bond lair, like the volcano lair in You Only Live Twice, is a work of art. Like these things should have been preserved and put in museums somehow. Yeah, I don't know how, because they're gigantic, but still they're fantastic. Like even like the sketches of how he did this. He is a legendary just production designer. You know, he's insane.
A favorite of mine is Atlantis in The Spy Who Loved Me. That's kind of a crazy idea, but just amazing. With this kind of underwater world, really, encased in a floating dome sort of thing. Yeah. But the line I was referring to from Goldfinger is, man has climbed Mount Everest, gone to the bottom of the ocean. He has fired rockets to the moon, split the atom, achieved miracles in every field of human endeavor, except crime. I just love the way he says "except crime" at the end, really passionately.
Well, this one is great because of how poorly it aged. There's actually two in the same sequence. One is when he pats Dink on the ass and he goes, "Move along, honey, man talk," and he smacks her on the ass and sends her away. But then the other one is when he's complaining about the Beatles. It's like listening to the Beatles without earmuffs.
Yeah. Well, the Beatles are quite popular, man. So you're alone there. But I think my favorite line is from James Bond when he first hears Ulrich is called Goldfinger, and he says, "Ulrich Goldfinger sounds like a French nail varnish." Not why would he know about French nail varnish? I don't know, but sure. Love it. So, screenplay score for me for Goldfinger. Again, I got to go pretty high just because of how kind of intricate the story is, and kind of just how like intriguing it is at the start, and just kind of the power dynamics between Bond and Goldfinger, and just how brilliant, like when you think it's basically like Goldfinger is planning a massive heist to remove all the gold from Fort Knox. No, he's planning to blow it all up so his gold skyrockets in value. It's just such a great bait and switch sort of thing. And it all kind of hinges on, to save the day, it all kind of hinges on other particular characters like Pussy Galore and Felix Leiter as well to help Bond. And as you go deeper into the story as well, like Bond becomes increasingly desperate, even though he's not particularly showing it, but you're like, I don't know how Bond is going to get out of this at all, you know. So it's just really cleverly done. So I'll go a solid 9. for me.
Yeah, there's so many great quips and one-liners, and the plot is so unique and tight, and it's just so much fun throughout. There's never a lull, and there's so much creativity on display. I'm gonna give it a 9.4, just
Cool.
because I think it's incredibly strong with just so many iconic moments that have been parodied for almost 50 years. It has such a staying power, and the plot is great. The power dynamics, like you said, yeah, it's fantastic. And even there's little setups like when Bond meets Pussy Galore on the plane, and she has a gun on him, and she's pointing it at him, and he calmly is like, "If you shoot that in here, we'll be shucked out of the window," which pays off later. Yeah, it's really fun. So I gotta give it a high score.
Awesome. Right, acting then. Sean Connery is probably at his charming best in Goldfinger, and it always comes through the most with his scenes with Pussy Galore. But it just makes me laugh every time I read that name out. But for most of the film, she's having none of it, and I just quite like the acting from Honor Blackman, as she's probably the first Bond girl that has something about her, and she can obviously take care of herself. And Bond certainly identifies Pussy Galore as his only option to stop Operation Grand Slam, and obviously it's revealed she switches up the nerve gas. So in the barn scene, they have a little tumble in the hay, as you do. And the scene is mainly done for humor. And Bond ends up, let's say, forcibly kissing her. And she starts enjoying it. But it's all you get in terms of Bond getting Pussy Galore on side. So I guess it's just interesting with Honor Blackman's acting that she just doesn't give anything away with where her loyalties lie going into the last act. So, yeah, I think she's brilliant, Honor Blackman.
She's great in this. She's the first Bond girl to voice herself, to not be dubbed. so she gets some points there. At the time, she was the oldest Bond girl for a long time. She's 38 years old in this. Okay. I think it's not until Maud Adams in Octopussy where she's passed.
Oh, right. Okay.
But Honor Blackman is great in this. Pussy Galore in the book, it's more clear that she's a lesbian, and she hates men. In this movie, it's more hinted at, where she's like, I'm immune to your charms, trust me. And it's very Fleming that Bond has to seduce and flip the lesbian straight to get her to save the day. It's very Fleming. This movie does it in a more subtle way for the 60s. And what's funny is you couldn't do that now in a movie, tell that story like the traditional Fleming way. I don't think where Bond has to flip the lesbian, that's a possible thing. So it still is kind of edgy even today, 60 years later, even more so edgy. It's consistently edgy. So it does earn some points for that. She's great in this. Connery is so cool. He has figured out the Bond character perfectly, where he knows exactly who Bond is. He knows how he wants to play him. He knows how to look as cool as humanly possible, and he's mastered it. And I think there's two movies where it's he understands Bond perfectly and he's happy to do it.
Yeah.
And I think it's Goldfinger and Thunderball, where he has cracked the code. And he has this smarmy charm about him, and he's hitting the one-liners great, and there's enough goofy fun, whereas From Russia with Love's Bond is very different than the Goldfinger Bond, I think.
Okay.
Where he's more serious, and he's not it's not like he's having fun almost. Where this kind, I don't know, it just feels like Bond is enjoying himself. It's leisurely. I think Connery is just great in this. Maybe the coolest anyone has ever looked on screen is him in several scenes in this movie. So I'm going to give it a really high score for acting.
Awesome. Yeah, I think there's an element with Connery. Yeah, he's really enjoying it, but situationally, he's in such a tight spot, under Goldfinger's control. From a character perspective, he's allowing himself to have a little bit more fun, because he's like, well, I'm pretty screwed here, so I'm just going to try and charm my way out of this as best I can. Whereas, like, in From Russia with Love, like, yeah, he's very quippy still, not as much, but he's on mission, like, all the time, and he's not sure who he can trust in From Russia with Love a lot of the time. Whereas from minute one, you're like, yeah, you don't trust Goldfinger. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
Or any of the
The
other
man's cheating.
people associated
We
with
can't
it.
trust him.
No, of course not. But also, there's one kind of significant moment where I think one of my favorite scenes from Sean Connery is not really a scene where he's having fun. It's when he actually discovers Jill Madison when she's dead, covered in gold paint. He gives off a real look of horror from Sean Connery. It's not much, and he very much looks unnerved, like you would anyway if you see that for the first time, just as an audience member. But I think Connery portrays like a great balance of just trying to keep his masculinity, his cool, whilst also like trying to process what he's seeing because it's so striking. So he does an incredible job there for me of just balancing that tone with his acting of what he's witnessing as James Bond. Gert Frobe is great as Goldfinger for me, even though he can't speak a word of English and all his dialogue is dubbed.
Yep.
But it's still like a really satisfying performance to watch, especially with his scenes with Sean Connery. Like, he has like a certain charm about him, but there's also like a limit of how much wit and banter he has with Bond until he wants to move on with like his plans. Like, he very much can suss out Bond's bullshit pretty quickly. And sometimes he like kind of plays along with it, like in the golf game, but sometimes it's like, okay, go back to your cell or whatever. It's like, I've had enough. So he definitely sees through Bond's charms, and he knows he's onto him pretty much from word go. You know, just the interplay is great. Like, that mainly comes through in the acting for me, not necessarily the dialogue.
Yeah, there's a great interplay between the two of them where it's like there's this thing where it's like we don't like each other, but we're almost competing in like this game almost, you know?
Yeah.
And I love that there's like this cat and mouse element between the two of them. And Bond is always behind the 8 ball until eventually he's not, you know, and he gets him on the plane.
Yeah. Any other acting points you want to make?
No, I think that's it, really. I mean, I think Desmond Llewellyn, this is Q. This is one of his, because he's not in Dr. No, but this is his second appearance. And I think he's kind of bringing a little more ornery Q. You know, he's a little rougher around the edges. I don't joke about my work, 007. You know, like he's kind of the Q that'll bicker with Bond a bit more, that we'll see in later movies. You know, it's starting to round into shape. Like, I got you this Aston Martin. Don't ruin my cars, you know? Like,
I love that little bit of disappointment, though, from Sean Connery, where he's just like, well, where's my Bentley? What's wrong with my Bentley? What? No, you've got a new car now, Bond. An Aston Martin DB5 with all the modifications you would ever want. He gets over it pretty quick, I think.
Yeah.
Favorite performance for you? Silly question again? Or?
I gotta go Sean Connery. Yeah. You know, it's not even a contest.
Yeah, Sean Connery for sure. Acting score for me, though. Yeah, I think this is a tough one, to be honest. Like, comparing it to From Russia with Love, in terms, I think the other characters in From Russia with Love, I think, do a better job overall than in Goldfinger for me. Like Rosa Klebb, Grant, Karim Bey are all kind of stronger acting performances for me. Like, Gert Frobe is great, but other than that, like, Honor Blackman is pretty good too. But other than that, there's like not a lot to go on, I don't think, in terms of acting from other characters, even though Sean Connery is having more fun in this film, whereas It's hard because, as we've said, like Sean Connery is still having fun in From Russia with Love, but he's on mission a lot more and just trying to figure things out. Whereas Connery is really sinking his teeth into the role and having fun. So, which is what you want when you're watching this kind of slightly more fun tone to this movie. So I will go like an 8.3 for me.
Okay. Acting, again, this could easily be a 10 in my opinion, but I'm gonna keep it reasonable and I'm gonna say 9.4 maybe.
9.4.
That sounds good. I don't remember what did I give From Russia with Love?
8.8.
8.8. I'll go 9.2.
Okay.
I'll go 9.2. Just because I think Connery is so friggin' great in this, and in my heart they're both 10s, but just for the sake of the show, I'm being reasonable.
Sure. Right. Let's add up the scores then for Goldfinger. Goldfinger gets a very impressive 54.4, which beats From Russia with Love, which got 52.4.
Wow, I did not think Goldfinger was going to win. Oh, wow.
Yeah. 2 points exactly in it. So very, very tight.
I disagree with this.
You went for a lot of 9s on Goldfinger.
So. I thought I went for 9s too on From Russia with Love. I didn't.
No, you went 8.2 for directing for From Russia with Love.
Okay, yeah, I think that's probably the difference.
Yeah, very tight though.
I just wish From Russia with Love was a little more dynamic. I think that's the difference. There's just not the iconography of Goldfinger, but. Yeah. In reality, they're both They're both 30s across the board for me.
Yeah. So next episode then, as Minecraft, the movie, is out, we are talking video game adaptations 3, and we've done 2 previous episodes on that. So on video game adaptations. So check those 2 previous episodes out. So we're doing a 3rd one because they are actually quite popular episodes. And we'll have another returning guest for that one, Claire from Why the Flick. Always great with her. Do check it out. Brian, you have been amazing. Thank you again for coming on. It's been an absolute blast hearing all your Bond knowledge. It's always great. Thank you very much, sir. This is your time again to tell us about your podcast, and where can we find you, sir?
Thank you again for having me. I love this. I love getting to talk movies and especially Bond. So that was fun. I was not intending to have Goldfinger win. I went in being like, I wanted From Russia with Love to win. So, so I'm actually a little disappointed with that myself because that's my favorite Bond movie. I just want to clear that up. But again, math is not my strong suit, and I was not trying to game it. I was just speaking from the heart. I should have just given them both 10s across the board and had you do the final say. That's where I messed up. But my podcast is Reviewing History. We're a comedy history podcast. We watch movies based on true stories. We go through it. We tell you what's real and fake in them as we make dick and fart jokes and laugh. It's a good time. We have almost 150 episodes. So if there's a movie based on a true story, there's a good shot we have done it, or we are going to do it soon. We also have a Patreon, patreon.com/reviewing history. We go through all sorts of different subjects there, video games, TV, movies, everything. It's just a blast. We get to talk about all different subjects. It's a playground for us to get out of the confines of our regular show and explore what we like to talk about a bit more. So patreon.com/reviewing history for the Patreon. You can see what's coming out each month. And that's free. You can even subscribe to the Patreon for free and just keep updated on what is coming out, and maybe something will catch your fancy. And Reviewing History everywhere. Review History Pod on Twitter, Reviewing History Pod everywhere else. Check out YouTube. You can follow me personally on all social media at Brian Rupert. That's with 2 P's. Follow me on Letterboxd. I rank and review every single movie I watch, even the ones in my personal life. Thank you.
Awesome. Right, it's time to say goodbye, people. It is goodbye from Brian. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And it is goodbye from me. I'm going to work on my Sean Connery accent because it's pretty bad. Bye-bye. That's it for part 2. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Check out part 1 if you haven't done so already. But don't stop there. Get involved and tell me what your favourite films are relating to the episodes. Send us a DM or comment on Instagram and TikTok at Film vs. Film Podcast, for X at FVF_podcast. Plus, we are now on YouTube, so hit that like button and comment there. If you do, I'll give you a shout out on the next episode. Remember, please leave us a 5-star review and subscribe. Pod signing off.